"Sir, this section is for designated family only. Step back or security will escort you." That's what they told him. He didn't argue. He simply stood there in his faded marine jacket, clutching the invitation his son had written by hand. "Dad, I want you in the front row." They insisted he didn't belong, but 6 Navy SEALs seated silently in the 5th row recognized exactly who he was. When they rose, everything changed. Welcome to Grateful Stories, where tales of quiet heroism and compassion come to light. Let's uncover what really happened. The morning sun had barely risen above the Virginia hills when Linda Monroe pulled into the faculty lot of St. Albans College in Albemarle County. The sky was a clear pale blue, and the gentle breeze carried that hopeful stillness reserved for graduation mornings. She took a moment before leaving her car, smoothing the wrinkles in her dress, the program clutched tightly in her hand. Her son's name appeared halfway down the second column under Dean's list. She had gazed at those 2 words countless times over the previous weeks, each glance filling her chest with a pride she scarcely understood. Today was his day. Today was graduation. The auditorium buzzed by the time she stepped inside. Balloons bobbed above anxious families, signs and bouquets dotted the rows. The murmur of conversation mixed with the clicks of cameras as proud parents jockeyed for the best view. Linda followed the usher's gesture to her seat, 5th row, center left, an ideal spot to take in both the stage and the crowd. She liked observing the students as they lined up, caps askew, shoulders squared, but she liked even more watching the audience, the ripple of excitement, the anticipation in their eyes. Then, she saw him. He didn't enter through the main doors like everyone else. He appeared from a side exit near the emergency stairwell, moving with deliberate slowness, utterly alone. His marine dress jacket was the same style Linda remembered from her father's funeral. Navy blue, brass buttons dulled with age, fraying at the seams. It hung loosely on his frame, the shoulders a size too wide. His jeans were threadbare at the knees and his boots bore the scuffs of long use. His hands were clasped behind his back, and though the rest of the crowd bustled around him, adjusting ties, laughing, chatting, he remained motionless, like a statue rooted in place. Linda's curiosity flickered. He didn't appear lost or disoriented. He looked steady, patient, watchful, like someone waiting for a moment he deemed vital. She watched him for a few seconds before he began to move quietly toward the roped-off front section, where silver placards marked each reserved seat. Those placards bore names of guest of honor. The man paused in front of an empty seat, near the aisle, clasped his hands in front of him, and stood as if expecting to be seated. Just then, the young usher with the headset approached him. "Sir," she said, clipboard held close to her chest, "this section is for designated family only." Her tone left no room for debate. He nodded once, the motion controlled, calm. "My son's graduating today," he replied softly. "I should be on the list." She didn't glance at her clipboard, didn't attempt to confirm his claim. She simply pointed behind her. "You'll need to step back, please, or security will escort you." Linda watched as he took one step back. No resistance, no argument. Then two security guards hovered behind the usher, their attention already on him. The crowd, meanwhile, remained oblivious, wrapped up in its own excitement. Only Linda and a small group of men in row 5, just a few seats to Linda's right, kept their eyes fixed on him. They watched as he settled against the side wall. Beneath the glowing red exit sign, hands still folded behind his back, chin raised slightly, his gaze locked on the stage. Soon, the ceremony began. A booming voice welcomed students, parents, honored guests. Applause rose, cameras clicked. The dean made a quip about tuition hikes. Polite laughter echoed. But Linda's attention stayed on the man at the back. He hadn't shifted an inch, the eye. Usher in the headset passed by again, now flanked by another staff member. "He's still standing there," the first whispered. "I don't think he's invited. I'll have security keep an eye on him," the other replied under her breath. Linda felt a tightening in her chest. Not fear, not anger, but a second-hand shame. Because that man, whoever he was, didn't look like a troublemaker. He seemed like someone who had already endured too much to bring any sort of chaos here. Soon the student speaker took the podium. He was polished, crisp suit, perfect posture. According to the program, he was the dean's son. He spoke with measured pauses, expressing gratitude to faculty, family, friends. Then he added, with a chuckle, "A special thanks," he said, "to the presentable family sitting right here in the front, reminding us what real college values look like." Polite laughter trickled through the audience. Linda didn't laugh. Neither did the man at the back or the three men in row 5. They exchanged silent glances. Quick, knowing. One of the three, tall with a buzz cut beneath a baseball cap, leaned forward just slightly. "That was for him," he murmured. His companions nodded once, their eyes locked on the distant figure. Linda glanced back to the stage, then to the man by the wall. His posture was unchanged, still waiting. She felt a pang of indignation. He hadn't come here to create a scene. He had come to see his son. Someone had made a mistake, a big one. She didn't know his name, where he'd come from, what battles he'd seen. But she recognized the jacket. She knew that jacket. She knew the weight it carried. Names were called one after another. Applause, flashbulbs. Yet Linda remained transfixed by the man at the back. Across from her, the three men in row 5 still watched him. Their poise didn't match the laid-back enthusiasm around them. They sat straighter, their eyes never wavering, as though anticipating something. When the ushers reappeared, this time carrying a security clipboard, Linda leaned forward. The man stayed rooted in place as an usher approached him. He turned his head only enough to listen as the guard spoke. Linda caught no words, but she saw his response. The man shook his head gently, then spoke in a firm but quiet tone. "I'm not causing trouble. My son asked me to be here. I'm not moving until I see him walk that stage." The guard straightened, perhaps trying to assert authority. "Sir, I need you to come with me," he said. Linda scanned the room. Nobody noticed this quiet standoff. Families at the front were too busy lining up their shots, worried about getting the perfect photo. But Linda watched, mortified. She leaned toward the woman beside her, one of the school administrators, judging by the name badge. "Do you know who that man is?" she asked in a low voice. The woman glanced up from her program, disinterested. Probably someone who wandered into the wrong section. These ceremonies always bring extras. Extras. The word stung Linda more than she expected. As though this man, this silent figure in his worn-out jacket, were just excess clutter. She looked back at him, really saw him for the first time. The lines etched into his face, the set of his jaw, the way his left shoulder sloped from some old injury. He carried years of hardship in that stance. The jacket wasn't for show. It was the best he had. She didn't know how long he'd waited, but she did know one thing. He came prepared for this moment, not for a confrontation, but for his son. A second guard stepped forward and touched his elbow, guiding him away. That's when Linda heard it, the faint crinkle of paper. The man reached into the inside pocket of his jacket, drawing out a small, creased card. The edges were soft from countless readings. He held it up, not to the guard, but simply in front of him, a reason, not a weapon. "My son sent this," he said in a measured voice. Linda caught a glimpse of the pale blue ink on folded cream. Paper, words written by a hand she assumed was younger than his, more hopeful. One simple sentence. "Dad, I want you in the front row." But that hadn't mattered to the staff. No guest pass, no seat. She felt anger rise, but also shame. Not her shame. His. She opened her mouth to speak, to challenge the guards, but she didn't need to. From row 5 came a scrape of chairs shifting backward. Then another, then 4 more. 6 men rose silently in unison. They didn't shout, they didn't demand. They simply moved, a silent wave of acknowledgement coursing through the auditorium. The man nearest the aisle, tall, broad, eyes sharp, beneath a plain baseball cap, strode toward the back, toward the old Marine who was being escorted out of his own son's graduation. In his hand gleamed a small object, silver wings catching the stage lights. He held it up, palm open. Linda squinted. It was a badge, gold with silver wings, centered by a trident, then another Navy SEAL insignia, and another, until all 6 stood behind the Marine, not flanking him, not shielding him, but supporting him. The tall SEAL faced the security guard, his voice low yet resonant. That man doesn't leave this room. He led us through hell. He stays right here. Gasps rippled through the rows. Some parents turned, confused. Most still hadn't grasped what was unfolding. But Linda saw. She saw the quiet authority in those 6 faces. She stood slowly, dread mingling with relief. The usher who had dismissed him stepped back, eyes wide. The old Marine, Raymond Cole, did not cheer or smirk. He simply lowered his gaze, as though he carried something heavy, something unspoken. He had come for his son, not a spectacle. A hush settled so deep that even the hum of the overhead lights seemed loud. The 6 SEALs stood shoulder to shoulder, their civilian clothes doing nothing to hide the gravity of their presence. The badges in their hands glinted under the stage lights. Linda remained still, heart hammering in her ears. The room turned, fully toward the back. Conversations halted, phones lowered, laughter died out, as if it never belonged. Then, a new voice rose from the left side of the auditorium. It was older, measured, calm. A man stood, his chest adorned with ribbons and medals beneath a gray jacket. Linda recognized the lines of his uniform and the medals that shimmered in the light. He was a colonel. She felt a jolt of recognition, herself as several attendees gasped. "I know that man," the colonel said without hesitation. His voice, though quiet, carried across the silent space. "His name is Master Sergeant Raymond Cole, 3rd Reconnaissance Battalion, United States. Marine Corps, retired. In 2006, during Operation Firewatch in Kandahar, I watched him run into a burning compound to drag out 5 Marines under live fire. He didn't wait for orders. He just went. He was the only one who came back with no injuries, carrying others on his back." Linda felt the silence grow heavier. The colonel's words painted a vivid picture. The burning compound, the bullets, the resolve in that man. He was not just a veteran, he was a hero. Now here he stood, nearly cast aside for a lack of a simple seat. A single cough echoed. Someone dropped a program in disbelief. Yet still, no applause, no cheers. Linda met Raymond's eyes for the first time. He remained standing, silent, his posture the same as when he had walked in hours ago. That jacket, those worn boots, they spoke of battles fought and survived. The colonel finished. "He carried the rest of us on his back. He deserves more than a seat. He deserves our respect." At that moment, the room felt consecrated, as though the weight of collective shame and honor converged. Then, movement behind. The graduates, a young man in cap and gown, Lucas Cole, navigated the stage, purpose in every step, his cap tilted just so, his hands trembling slightly as he reached the microphone. Lucas didn't hesitate. He leaned in and spoke with a voice tight with emotion. "That's my dad." All eyes turned to Lucas. He stared at the crowd, voice trembling but steady. "He didn't come out here today for this," Lucas said, nodding, toward the stage behind him. "He came because I asked him to be here. Every morning before school, for as long as I can remember, he told me, 'Stand tall. Keep going. Be someone you'd be proud to look in the eye.'" He paused, swallowing hard. "I'm proud today. Not because of this degree, not because of this stage. I'm proud because of him. The auditorium fell silent again, the kind of silence that only comes in sacred moments. Lucas stepped off the stage, moving down the aisle, passing rows of stunned graduates. He walked toward the back until he reached his father, who had remained in place, unwavering. Raymond did not salute. Lucas raised his hand and saluted anyway. Raymond stepped forward and pulled his son into an embrace. Their hug was quiet and unvarnished. No theatrics, no pretense. Linda felt tears burn behind her eyes as she witnessed a bond forged through sacrifice and love. It was real, and that authenticity hit harder than any speech could. The 6 seals straightened even further, their posture rigid as they saluted Raymond. Then, almost in unison, they tucked away their trident badges. They didn't sit. They stayed standing behind him, where they had always been, unseen and unsung until this moment. The crowd remained still, jaws dropped, eyes fixed on the scene, unfolding at the back. When the dean finally stepped back to the podium, his voice had lost all its earlier confidence. He cleared his throat, swallowed. "We are honored today," he began, voice smaller than anyone remembered, "to welcome guests of great distinction, some of whom we failed to recognize soon enough." There was a pause, a few scattered claps, then more and more, until the room rose in collective applause. But this applause wasn't for the gown or the degree. It was for a man who had walked in with nothing but a folded card in his pocket and carried a burden that had nothing to do with diplomas. Raymond didn't smile. He didn't soak it in. He reached into his jacket again, unfolded the cream card with the faded blue ink, read the words his son had penned. "Dad, I want you in the front row." He refolded it and tucked it back into his coat pocket, close to his heart. That was why he'd come. Not for recognition, not for applause, just for that seat. And now he had it. After the ceremony, as the crowd filed out, many lingered in the aisles. Students, some wearing tears on their faces, passed by Raymond's seat. Some shook his hand. Some laid a gentle hand on his shoulder, then moved on without a word. One young woman in her cap and gown, her cheeks stained with tears, paused, saluted him, and whispered, "Thank you for carrying them." Raymond nodded, saying nothing. Linda's throat tightened at that moment. She couldn't remember the last time she'd witnessed such raw gratitude. There was no fanfare, no cameras, just truth. Then one of the seals, the youngest of the 6, stepped forward. He placed something small into Raymond's hand, a challenge coin. Linda recognized the round medallion immediately. She had seen one at a funeral once. They were not tokens given lightly. Raymond turned it over in his palm. One side bore the SEAL team emblem. The other side carried 5 engraved words. "The quiet ones lead the loudest wars." Raymond closed his hand around the coin. He didn't break down in tears, but Linda thought she saw his shoulders ease, the tension in his body soften. It was as though some of that weight he carried had been lifted, shared, if only for a moment. The auditorium lights dimmed. Floral arrangements were taken down, chairs were stacked. The janitorial staff moved quietly through the rows. Linda remained in her seat longer than most, unwilling to let go of the scene she'd witnessed. She wanted to see what happened once the applause faded, once the audience dispersed. One by one, students and parents passed Raymond's seat, leaving murmured words of thanks in his wake. He remained seated for a while, reading and rereading the card from his son. Then, finally, he stood, his boots clicking softly on the tile floor, each step measured, deliberate, reflecting the same resolve he had carried through every battlefield he'd faced. Lucas took his father's hand and led him toward the front row, the very row that had been closed to him hours before. The usher who had turned him away earlier stepped aside, head bowed. No words were exchanged. Raymond walked past, took his seat, second row, center left. Lucas remained at his side. Behind them, those 6 SEALs still stood at attention, neither sitting nor moving, their tridents tucked away. Their place was behind him, always was. The dean, eyes still reeling from what had transpired, returned to the podium. This time, his voice carried a quiet reverence as he directed the room's attention not to the graduates, but to a man who had exemplified values far beyond academic achievement. "We apologize for our oversight," he said. Then he welcomed Raymond Cole properly, offering belated recognition for the hero in their midst. Raymond did not acknowledge it with words. He simply sat, keeping that folded invitation close to his chest. No triumphant gestures, no bows. He got what he came for. A seat. An honest seat, given rather than demanded. Once the ceremony concluded, the crowd moved outside for photos, laughter, and congratulations. Linda lingered a moment longer, then turned to leave, her heels clicking on the tile. At the exit, she paused, her hand on the door handle. She looked back one last time at the 6 men who still stood guard behind Raymond, at Lucas, capped slightly, askew, who had given up his moment on stage for the man who would always be the reason he stood there today, and at Raymond Cole himself, who had stood in silence until the room finally rose to honor him. Inside her heart, Linda whispered, "He didn't come to demand anything. He came for a seat." But by the time he left, the whole room stood for him. Not because he asked for it, but because they owed it to him. She gently closed the door behind her. In our darkest moments, kindness finds a way. Often, that kindness is found in the quiet corners where no spotlight shines. Some people who help us never seek recognition. They simply need to know that someone cared, and sometimes that alone is enough to change a life. You may forget the details of this story, but if nobody retells it, history falls silent. Subscribe to Grateful Stories, where justice is honored, kindness is remembered, and no act of quiet heroism is ever lost.